shot some kids in Colorado yesterday, and I have some thoughts on that I'd like to share with you. You'll pardon me as I'll need to read through most of this stuff. There's a lot to go through, and if you don't mind, I'd like to read through it because my memory isn't the best. Before we get started, I want you to bear in mind that it's common for inaccurate or even conflicting facts to be published in the first few days after a chaotic and violent event like that. It's also common for more accurate facts to be released in the days that follow, and that doesn't indicate there's some kind of conspiracy, cover up, or fakery. If you start talking about conspiracy bullshit on my channel, I will ban you. If you're the kind of person who believes that shootings like this are faked, you are absolute human garbage, and I hope that you die in a fire after a long, painful, humiliating, but ultimately successful battle with anal cancer. Please die. That out of the way, here are the facts as I know them. There was one dead, 8 wounded, 2 shooters, one male 18-year-old and one female who was originally thought to be male. She may actually be transgender, but that's going to be hard to confirm because she's a juvenile. They had 2 handguns. The male shooter had communicated violent thoughts to another student prior to the shooting. 3 students attempted to stop the male shooter, and one was shot in the chest, and he's the one who later died. The shooters were stopped by armed private security. Law enforcement response time was 2 minutes. Sheriff deputies had to force entry because the school was in lockdown, and there is no word on how long that took. So while cops showed up after about 2 minutes, which is phenomenal, we don't actually know how long it took them to make entry. Most media is not following the Some Asshole initiative, and I think we should all write to them and explain to them that they should. Probably not literally in the case of the larger media. They probably shouldn't use the phrase "some asshole." If you haven't read the comic, the Some Asshole initiative comes from this comic called The Non-Adventures of Wonderella. I hadn't ever heard of it until I heard of Some Asshole. But if you get a chance, read that. I'll put a link to it in the description after I get done filming this. The point is that we shouldn't glamorize shooters. I believe that traditional media is largely responsible for mass shootings and that they should stop naming shooters. Of course, it's a complex problem, but one of the several factors involved is the fact that shooters know they'll be famous. The shooter's name is of absolutely no consequence to anyone, and it just shouldn't be reported by the media. Of course, law enforcement should release it once a suspect's name becomes known and all that, but the media should mostly ignore that. CBS stands out as being one of only 2 sources that I read which pasted the male shooter's name right at the beginning of the article. They were also the only source that I found to publish a photo of him. And they even used his name multiple times in the article. So they were in complete disregard of the Some Asshole initiative. Washington Post also reported the shooter's name at the very beginning of the article. Fox and NPR did not report the adult shooter's name, but both reports were light on facts about the shooting itself anyway. Most sources that do name the adult shooter bury it near the end of the articles. They simply list the name one time as provided by law enforcement and are not, as of yet, publishing photos of him. That's something, at least. The New York Times reports that in Colorado, this is a quote, in Colorado, it is illegal for anyone under 21 to own a handgun. No shit. That's a federal law, folks. Why would they do the research to find out if it's legal for shooters to have bought these guns and then imply that it might have been illegal in another state? It's infuriating to read that sort of thing where it's illegal in Colorado for 18-year-olds to buy handguns. Just Colorado, though. New York Times also editorializes at the end of its article, the shooting at Highlands Ranch Charter School is the latest at an educational institution, a phenomenon that has rattled communities nationwide as young people continue to face mortal danger in places long considered safe havens. It's common for news media to exaggerate the risk of school shootings, but since when were schools considered safe havens? How? What sort of delusional thinking would you need to have to think that a school was any safer than any other place where defenseless victims gather? Did they think that fairies had cast some magical spell of protection? Perhaps the rise of talk radio in the 90s broke that spell and caused Columbine. Credit where it's due, the NBC account of school shootings uses rational criteria. I'll post the criteria and the links in the description. According to the NBC criteria, 64 people have been killed in 41 school shootings. In perspective, it may sound cold, but that's not a lot of people in a nation of our size. And as much as it pains me to give credit to NBC, their reporting is actually fairly accurate and rational on this. CNN breathlessly sensationalized. Just a few miles from Columbine School, gunfire echoed through the hallways of Ranch near Denver. Do you remember when journalists reported facts without creative writing to make it sound more dramatic? Yeah, me neither. Dispassionate, factual accounts. A few editorialized a bit, but this CNN piece wins the Drama Award. USA quote, Douglas County Sheriff Tony Spurlock said one suspect is a female juvenile after police originally identified the teen as male. Again, not that it particularly matters, but it is, I find it a bit curious that they originally thought she was a boy. I don't know, maybe she just had short hair. Now, I predict this shooting will fade from the news cycle pretty quickly for a few reasons. One, low body count. If it bleeds, it leads, and news media wants sensationalism. Not that they necessarily want people to die, but they're not likely to report on incidents where there aren't a lot of deaths, and that's pretty morbid. Handguns were used, not scary black rifles, so it doesn't fit with the narrative. It's possible that the female shooter was transgender, although we shouldn't be too quick to jump to conclusions. But if that is the case, it's unlikely to be reported, and again, it runs counter to the narrative. Most importantly, here's the big thing, the shooting was stopped by a good guy with a gun. As tragic as it is that a young man's life was cut short, and as awful as it is that other kids were hurt, this would, for sure, have been much worse if that private security guard hadn't stopped it. Police were there pretty quickly, but not as fast as the security guard who was, already there. And once the police were there, they had to break into the school because it was in lockdown. Like I said earlier, I don't know how long it took them to get in. So, what do we do now? Pray for the victims and their families. Write traditional media and tell them that they should be ashamed of themselves for glorifying shooters and publishing shooter names. We shouldn't hear it. We shouldn't hear the shooter names, and we most certainly shouldn't see their photos. At the very least, send some emails to, who was it, CBS, I think? Yeah, it was CBS that used the shooter's name multiple times in the article, pasted it right at the beginning, and also published a photo of the shooter. That's exactly the sort of immortalization that a lot of these shooters are looking to see. Teach your children kindness. Seriously, kids are assholes. A central theme in every single one of these shootings is bullying. Kids are brutal and relentless to each other. And I'm not making excuses for the shooters. Nothing, obviously, excuses their actions, but it is a reason. If we can show these people a little kindness, include the weird kids, then maybe they won't be so weird and alienated. Thanks for watching. If you have other ideas on what we can do to reduce school and mass shootings, leave a comment. Have a good day.